is that? Okay, rotate your phone. Oh, there I am. Good Lord. Okay, I think I've got this now. Sorry about that. I am really the first time I've ever actually used this function on my iPad. So I hope I am able to see some things while I'm talking. Hold on, let me just make sure I'm good here. Okay, what's that? Okay. All right, am I good? I hope I'm good. Hi, my name's Jennie Schmidt. I am doing this Facebook Live for Build Up RDN today. Good morning if you are in the early time zone, and good afternoon if you're in my time zone. I'm on the East Coast. Again, my name is Jennie Schmidt. I am a registered dietitian. I have not practiced as a dietitian now for 20 odd years. I actually farm full time. My family's farm is Schmidt Farms Inc. We are located in Sudlersville, Maryland, and we are about an hour and a half from DC, about an hour and a half from Baltimore, and about an hour and a half from Philadelphia. So we're pretty much an hour and a half from all of the major cities in the Mid-Atlantic. I did train as a dietitian. My undergraduate degree is from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and I did my dietetic internship at UMass Medical in Worcester. I ended up in Maryland because I met my husband through 4-H, and he owns the farm. It's his family farm. I got to marry into it. So while I did practice as a dietitian for a number of years, as a clinical dietitian, long-term care dietitian, and community nutrition in some small rural hospitals here on the eastern shore of Maryland. I left that practice about 20 years ago when we decided to have children, and I went back to work part-time, and then decided that I really did enjoy working on the farm. My husband asked me to assist whenever he needed somebody to run an extra piece of equipment. And from that, I just sort of worked to justify myself a job on the farm, because it really was what I enjoyed doing the most. So I left the hospital, clinical care and long-term care back in early 2000. I did finish my master's degree in human nutrition at the University of Delaware. And my thesis topic was actually about food and agricultural biotechnology. So my focus as an undergrad was in nutrition with a minor in international agriculture. And my focus as in a master's program was nutrition with a focus on food and agricultural biotechnology. So agriculture's sort of always been in the background of my career, of my choices in my academics. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, so I am not native to Maryland. My parents were not farmers. We grew up in rural Massachusetts, but my parents did not farm, so the agricultural piece is something that I've had to learn to incorporate into my skill set. I will say that having degrees in nutrition is actually very helpful in being a farmer, because the science is the science, whether it's a human biological system, plant, soil, or animal biological system. The science is very much a crossover. We are a large family farm. We only grow crops, mainly grains and fruits and vegetables. We used to be a livestock farm for about 50 years when my father-in-law owned the farm, and when my husband was growing up on the farm, they were into hogs and beef cattle, all outdoors, not in a confinement situation. But back in the late 90s, when pork and beef, what's the word I'm looking for? Live weight cost dropped to very low prices per pound for the animals. We decided to get out of livestock farming, and that's when we put up some center pivot irrigation and went into growing fruits and vegetables. So our farm is mainly corn and soybeans. Maryland's #1 industry is actually agriculture. Purdue Poultry is headquartered here in Maryland. So most of the grains that we do grow go to Purdue Poultry or any of the other poultry farms, integrators that are here in Maryland. So we also grow some tofu soybeans. That's one of sort of our specialty crops that we grow for a farmer's co-op, which is selling tofu soybeans, which are food-grade soybeans, a little bit different than feed-grade soybeans. Food-grade soybeans are higher in protein, and say they make a tofu or a better soy product because of that protein content than the protein that's in feed-grade soybeans. And those are sold to the Asian food processors in the Baltimore, DC, Philadelphia, and even up into the New York City area. We don't need a lot of tofu acres because you can make a lot of tofu on a bushel of soybeans, so the acreage isn't as high as what it would be for animals because soy consumption just isn't that high, and the products that you can make on a lot of bushels of soybeans. In terms of vegetables, we grow canning tomatoes for Fermano Foods, which is a cannery in Pennsylvania. We're currently featured on their label. So if you buy Fermano Foods, you'll see my family farm featured on their label, and it's something that we as farmers really do appreciate, the recognition that the food companies give their growers. I think that's really important way to acknowledge that somebody else did a lot of work before the product actually ever got to the food company. We also grow fresh green beans. They're for a distributor on the eastern shore of Virginia, and so they're processed, packaged, cleaned, chilled, and distributed to Walmart. They're distributed to Giant Foods and then any other grocery stores up and down the East Coast that they supply green beans for. We grow for fresh market in the green beans, however, if they don't grade out, because consumers have very specific expectations about the size and shape and color of green beans or any other of their fresh produce. So if they're speckled or they're too large or they're irregular, then they usually go for canning or for frozen market. But our goal is to grow for the fresh market because that is the way we get more premium paid, a better payment for a higher quality product. So all of our growing contracts really are specific to quality parameters, things that the food company has expectations for us when we grow, whether it's our tofu soybeans. One of the other soybeans that we grow is high oleic soybeans, and for you know that those are high in oleic acid, which is a monounsaturated fat. So Purdue Poultry has put into an oil extraction facility at their plant down in Salisbury, Maryland. So what they do is they buy the soybeans for poultry feed, but they extract the high oleic oil from the beans. They feed the chickens just the protein part, the soybean meal. And then the oil is refined and sold to food companies that use the high oleic oil instead of hydrogenated soybean oil. So it's one of the things that they've been able to do to get rid of trans fats, because the high oleic soybeans are trans fat free. So that's, let's see, I've done tomatoes, I've done green beans, grapes. So the other product we grow is grapes. We put in about 22 acres of wine grapes about 15 or so years ago. Mostly sell to regional wineries, mostly in Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, because for those of you who aren't from the Mid-Atlantic or the East Coast know how small our states are. So we can be in New Jersey in an hour, we can be in Delaware in 5 minutes, we can be in Pennsylvania, in an hour, we can be in Virginia in an hour and a half. Like I said, we're an hour and a half from DC. So we have a ready access market, and of course most states are having a growth in their wine industry, in their niche brewing, alcohol, distilling, all those types of things are sort of taking off in a lot of different states. So that's just one of the ways that we've tried to diversify our farm from having been a livestock farm for so many years and just growing corn and soybeans for feed, to getting out of livestock production and then growing fruits and vegetables and other products more for grocery stores. So that's sort of our business model. I call us, if you've heard me speak before at different conferences at Fancy or a state meeting or whatever, you've heard me call our farm a grocery store farm. And that's because we're all wholesale. We don't have any retail sales at all. You can't drive to our farm and buy anything from us because it all is sold wholesale. And that's really our preferred business model. It helps keep us sort of focused on what we do. A retail business model is a little bit more labor intensive. It requires more people. It capitalizes new equipment. It's a whole different ball game in terms of having customers come to your farm to be able to buy those types of things, whether it's a farm stand or going to farmers markets or having a CSA. Those are the things that we're not really geared up to, and you'd really have to have a family that is eager to do all of those things in order to make that venture successful. And so our focus is to secure the contracts with food companies in order to grow the products to the quality standards that they are expecting, and be able to do that with the number of people we have on hand, which is basically myself and my brother-in-law. So while our farm is big, it's about 2,000 acres. We till about 1,800 of those. We have about 120 acres in conservation land. So that is what we call set-aside land. Excuse me, land that we've taken out of production either because it's in a sensitive area along a stream or because it's serving as a buffer between a natural resource in order to conserve water quality, improve water filtration, and prevent sediment and erosion in our fields. And then we also have a couple hundred acres of timberland that we harvest every 10 or so years according to our forest conservation plan. And so for us it's being diversified but with as few people as possible. And so that really is our focus, why we are wholesale and not any retail. So I just see a question pop up. Perfect. So I am a certified pesticide applicator. And so what that means is I'm the one who does most of the spraying on our farm. I run 3 different types of sprayers. One is for our grains, which is also for our large-scale vegetables. And then I have 2 different sprayers for our vineyard. So the control for diseases and insects in grapes is very different from grain crops and also from vegetable crops. So for me, what it entailed was, because I actually have a lot of science training already, I was able to actually secure what's called a commercial applicator's license, which means I could spray for hire on somebody else's property. So for farmers, you have 2 types of certifications. You can either be a commercial applicator, which is a higher level standard of certification because of the liability of spraying on somebody else's property, or you can be a private applicator, which means you are trained and allowed to only spray on your own property. Because of the amount of chemistry that I've had, obviously through my training as a dietitian, it gave me the ability to go ahead for the commercial applicator's license. I don't do any spraying for hire. I strictly spray on our farm. But I do have that level of training. And just like our continuing education credits as dietitians, I have to secure continuing education credits for the Department of Agriculture every 2 years in order to maintain that certification. And so for me, it's very similar to doing my professional development plan. I need to be able to come up with the classes that I need to understand the products that I'm applying and any of the new things that are in the world of pesticide spraying to stay current in that skill set. So on our farm, for the spraying that I do, we do a lot of cover crop. We do a lot of no-till agriculture, which means we aren't working up the soil. We aren't plowing it. We aren't tilling it. We aren't rototilling it. We aren't working it up. We're basically planting directly into the residue of last year's crop or into our cover crop that we planted last fall. So to make sure that that cover crop or the weeds don't take control of our field and inhibit the growth of our actual crop that earns us an income, We do burn down the cover crop fields as well as the weeds. That's the main function of spraying an herbicide. So when I talk about pesticides as an applicator, I'm talking about herbicides which are in a pesticide class. So pesticide is sort of your overarching terminology. And underneath pesticides, then you have herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, miticides, bacteriicides, all of those things. And basically, a pesticide is anything that's designed to kill or inhibit something. So if you think about hand sanitizer is actually a pesticide. It's designed to kill the bacteria on your hands. It doesn't make it bad for you. You wouldn't drink it, but it is a pesticide because a pesticide is anything that's designed to kill a pest, including the bacteria on your hand. So when we go into a field and spray, I have a 700-gallon sprayer. It is loaded with water. That's, I think, one of the biggest myths that's out there in agriculture is that we're dousing our fields and we're using a heavy, heavy concentration of pesticide. And so the sprayer is actually loaded with water, which is the carrier. And then depending on which product I'm spraying, I read the label according to the EPA, what they have tested to be the correct application rate, depending on the crop and depending on my soil pH and depending on my soil type, whether it's clay, whether it's loam, whether it's sandy loam, all of those things are taken into consideration. So that's why it's critical. As an applicator, you need to know all those things and you need to read the label very thoroughly. You also need to make sure that you're wearing all of the protective equipment that is mandated on that label because that is what is required to protect yourself and your family. And so when I'm spraying something, and let's just use the glyphosate as an example because we'll probably roll right into that topic next. Glyphosate or Roundup, which is the brand name, but glyphosate is off patent, so there's tons of companies that produce glyphosate these days, and typically we buy it generic. It's anywhere from 22 to 32 ounces per acre. Our sprayer carries 700 gallons and we spray at 15 gallons per acre. And so that's 22 ounces mixed into those 700 gallons per acre. I can spray about 45 acres, 47 acres with my tank of spray. So it covers 45 football fields. Let's put that in sort of the visual terms that people may understand. So in terms of maybe 10 gallons total of product, glyphosate, that's in my tank, the other 690 is water. So water is the carrier that applies the product across 45 football fields, which is how many acres I can cover with a single tank of my spray program. Our tractors are enclosed. They have carbon. There we go. Are we back? Okay. Wow. So anyways, what that works out to is about 0.02 ounces per square foot. So if on social media you see that the farmers are out there dousing their fields, you can rest assured that we are not, because 0.02, 0.04 fluid ounces per acre is a spritz. It's very, very minimum. Yes, they are chemicals. We are applying them to our fields, either to control for weeds, to control for insects, or to control for diseases like specifically in our grapes. Trying to control for powdery mildew, downy mildew, phomopsis, black rot, any number of things, to diseases. And so while our grapes are permanent, and they're a 30 to 50 year life crop, our tomatoes are rotated on a 4-year basis. And that's another way of managing diseases. So it's not just spray something. That's not our first line of defense. Our first line of defense is crop rotation. So to control for diseases in our vegetables, which are particularly we do a lot of shoot thinning in the vineyard, and so we have what we call cultural approaches, which are the things that we can do to lessen the likelihood of there being a disease or a problem in the vineyard. So pulling leaves away from the grape clusters to give them more sunlight, controlling the weeds that grow underneath the vines so that there is a good wind flow. Wind and sun are two of the best disinfectants that we have at our disposal, because the sunlight, anything that's in shade and is constantly moist is growing mold and mildew. And so for us in the vineyard and in the tomato field particularly, are areas where we do what we call cultural practices to either thin plants out, position them differently, get rid of shade, expose more sun, put them in a position where there's more wind exposure. Those are all things that we can do before we have to decide to spray. So it is a decision-making process, sort of a tree of decision processes that you need to use in order to grow the best crop. We do have to follow quality parameters that are established for us by the food companies. And so our contracts are based on what the company wants and expects from us as we are growing in the different types of seasons and the different types of crops. That's a little less stringent than, say, for poultry feed or for hog feed or cattle feed, when you're growing for a food company who's actually processing that and bringing a product to the grocery store. Let's see, question. If you want to try and connect with farmers or visit a farm. So we do farm tours very regularly, and I would suggest that you contact one of two places depending on where you are, but your local extension office, either through your university, your land-grant university, or your county cooperative extension office, or your local farm bureau, either your state farm bureau or your county farm bureau. Probably Google would be the best place to come up with those answers for those specific contacts. But those would be the people who could put you in connection with a farmer who is able to offer farm tours. Some places do more agritourism type tours, and so those would be places that you might be able to find a Facebook page or some type of social media page where they offer events on their farm. A farm like mine, which does not really open, quote unquote, to the public because we're mostly wholesale, it's really word of mouth. We actually are on a list with USDA. We have foreign ag service groups. When they have foreign visitors come into the USDA in DC and they want to get them out of the city, they often will plan a tour to come to the Eastern Shore and swing by our farm to talk about how different agriculture is, or how similar agriculture is between the U.S. and whatever country that tour group came from. I didn't talk about my social media platforms. That was one of the things I was supposed to do right off the bat. So if you want to find me on social media, on Facebook I am the Foodie Farmer. On Twitter I go by the handle FarmGirlJen. And on Instagram, which I don't use a whole lot, I go by the handle Dirt Dietitian. So I never really settled on one particular title. I use all three of those, and it seems to work for me. So I try to keep track of all of those things. Let's see, some other questions. What are the top 2 questions I get? Well, we talked about pesticides some. One of the other top questions I do get is about GMOs, or genetically engineered crops. For those people who are really particularly interested in reading the science behind this, I would direct you to the National Academy of Science Genetically Engineered Crop Study. It is lengthy, but it's very informative. 2 of the crops that we grow are genetically engineered. One of those is the high oleic oil soybeans that I spoke about earlier. They are both Roundup ready, glyphosate tolerant, but they also have the genetic, I think it was done by RNAi manipulation for expressing the high oleic acid rather than going down the enzymatic pathway between oleic and linoleic acid. It has been engineered or bread to basically produce more of the oleic acid than the linoleic acid. And most of our corn is what we call stacked corn. So it has the Bt, or the insect-resistant traits, usually has either the Liberty link or the Roundup Ready glyphosate tolerant link. So there are a couple of different herbicide tolerant traits that are out there. It's important to know that those are not just exclusive to genetically engineered crops. There are traditionally bred crops, conventionally bred crops that are also herbicide tolerant. So STS soybeans are one example where they're tolerant to the class of herbicides called sulfonylureas, which, if you're a diabetes educator, you know that sulfonylureas are also a diabetes medication. So this is going to the Paracelsus statement where the dose makes the poison. The sulfonylureas are great as a diabetes medication. They also work really well as an herbicide, and the dose is completely different between those two. Also, you have a class of botanicals, because the botanicals are based on whether the crop is a grass or a broadleaf. So if I use a broadleaf herbicide over corn, it's not going to hurt the corn because corn is a grass. In the botanical family, it's a grass, and so a broadleaf herbicide isn't going to impact corn or wheat or barley because they're all in the grass class. If I was to spray a grass herbicide over the top of corn, I would kill it because it wouldn't be, it would be in the wrong botanical class. So a lot of it is not only about genetic engineering, it's also about the botanical class of the crop and what type of herbicide you can or cannot use over the top of that. Resources. I would send you probably first to a website called Common Ground Now. Common Ground is a group of volunteer farm women who are from across the country. I think we're in about 25 different states. I am a volunteer for the Mid-Atlantic chapter, which is Maryland and Delaware. And what we do is we talk about our farms. We go to different events. We were at Fancy last year. We'll be at Fancy in Philadelphia this year, talking about farming. Not as a presentation, although you may have seen me last year at Fancy speaking. But we were in the exhibit hall, and we will be in the exhibit hall again this year. But the farm moms are from the farm women are from all over the country, different types of farms, livestock, grains, fruits, vegetables, dairy, you name it. So I would encourage you to go to Common Ground Now. There's a lot of good videos from farm women. They have a Facebook page. They do some social media. I'm open to questions. You can always ask me anything. My email is thefoodiefarmer@gmail.com. You can find me on my Foodie Farmer Facebook page and send me a message that way. On Twitter, I am happy to answer questions whenever you have any agricultural or farming questions or need clarification or something, or just want to ask if you can come visit my farm. I will say that if you are ever in the DC area, you are welcome to give me a call and give me a visit, because we do really like to educate folks and have them understand more about what we do and what we don't do. There's a lot of misinformation on agriculture these days, and I love to clear those up. So again, if you want to reach out to me, my email is thefoodiefarmer@gmail.com. I am the Foodie Farmer on Facebook and Farm Girl Jen on Twitter. So thank you for being with me today. I hope I answered some questions, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks.